Captain Picard has a headache. Lieutenant Worf checks on Picard's fairly heavy chest. And the USS Stargazer has seat belts. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc, Lofton, and Denise Crosby.
Hello.
Hello, everyone.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we're doing a review of The Next Generation Season 1, Episode 7, The Battle. Story by Larry Forrester, teleplay by Herbert Wright, directed by the legendary Rob Bowman. This was November 16th, 1987. Where were you? Special thanks to Grandpa One for sponsoring this entire season, a.k.a. Tim Baum. How you guys doing?
Lovely.
Yeah.
Lovely.
All right.
Mm-hmm. This is one of those episodes I could not remember a single frame. I have no recollection of this episode whatsoever.
Do you think it's because you had some of the episodes were pretty focused on you, and this one was certainly you were part of the crew of their incoming message, Captain, or you just had these couple things here and there. Maybe you only had like a couple days that week.
Well, I mean, I was, obviously whenever they're on the bridge, I'm there, and so it never was only a couple days, even if there was no engaging of the character that much. I still was always in that position. But I mean, I couldn't remember sitting in the conference room, all of us lined up like that, or I just couldn't. If you would have asked me what was the battle about, there's no way I could have answered you. Absolutely. And I may still not be able to answer you if you ask me now. What is this thing? But okay, we'll get into it.
I actually thought about that when I watched this, Cirroc, I was like, this feels like it's an episode a little bit more for Cirroc. Cirroc kind of likes the mysteries and this and that. For me, a little less. And I was like, and I think Denise, so far from what I know of you, even less than me. But we'll see. We'll see how that pans out. What do you think, Cirroc?
One, I'll say that I've grown on the characters now at this point. So watching it now, I feel comfortable with the characters. I feel like I have a sense of who, the crew is. And so with that said, I'm comfortable with where that development is. The big issue is with the story, I guess, and how I felt it unfolded. Sometimes I'm watching and I'm thinking, I wish they would get to it already, like get to the part that they're going to get to, because they did a lot of setting up with the headache, this, and that. And I'm thinking, okay, we get it. We're trying to do some, something's wrong. We get what you're saying, but you can't keep hitting that same nail over and over again without getting to it. And that's why I felt like if they had gotten to the Picard taking over the other ship earlier, and it really been a drawn out battle and more of a confrontation, or maybe he escapes, and it could have been more. They could have gotten to him on that other ship sooner in the storyline for me.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it could have been much more. Yeah. Much more integral to the whole episode, that Stargazer battle, and I would have. I think the whole effect of it with the flames and the people not having any expression, even though he's this is a mind, a thought of his. It's not actual, but how much more compelling it could have been if they really staged the Stargazer. The action on it that was going on, not just this kind of fake, imagery of like what you have behind you, Ryan. There's like, it was so distracting to me to have these flames going and no one's reacting.
Going in this direction too.
There's no expression on any of their faces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was an interesting choice. What I actually liked about that slightly differently was, and I only noticed this at the very end, was when Picard's talking to one of these phantom memory people, the guy turns, I think it was Vigo, turns back, and there are like lines being said, but the actor's not actually saying them. So it's like in his memory, they're just these weird, stiff, whatever, but they're not actually saying the words. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I wouldn't have noticed that until the very end. But I think what the fans may like about this episode, and for me, kind of the only thing that I really enjoy a lot about this episode is the Stargazer itself. Because Picard later on is always talking about the Stargazer. It was his first captaincy. It was like the good old days on that little old ship with the 4 nacelles, and we actually get to see it. And the exterior shots of it are really beautiful. I love that, and I just, it's nice to see that old ship that he's always talking about, and that is actually revived in another ship called the Stargazer, or in other things in the new Picard series, they talk about the Stargazer as well. So that's, and they have a new Stargazer ship. So that's the fun part. That's the Star Trek nerd part that's enjoyable. The mystery that's not really my thing as much.
It wasn't much of a mystery. It was it was pretty obvious what was going on. That the Ferengi were there, they were doing some manipulation, that it was a trap. All of those kinds of things there was no mystery to it. It was pretty face value.
Right. Mm-hmm. And it just was, we know what's going on now that we're just waiting for the crew to catch on, because we're cutting to the Ferengi and they're, manipulating that sphere and talking. We don't know exactly what, that kind of stuff I had to kind of go, wait, what is this? What is he doing? The techno stuff is like, I'm trying to wrap my head around the thought manipulation, because it's circuitry of some sort. And, it's a little, I don't know. It's a little rough edged to kind of smoothly grasp the story. Plus you've got the Ferengi, which don't make it easy to kind of comprehend really their speech and everything. So I lose a lot of the dialogue when they're speaking.
And I also felt there's moments when Picard is essentially confused and in a shady place the whole time, and I, as the viewer, felt like that as well. I was foggy about, like, what are we, what happened exactly? What are you reenacting? What is this reenactment about? Is it something that you're forcing? Is it a new version of events, or is it a reenactment of already occurred events? And I was kind of vague about that kind of a thing. And there was just moments where I felt lost looking at it, and just as lost as Picard.
It's hard for me to really believe that Picard isn't absolutely sure of what he did. That he would be even, yes, it's my voice, but it obviously is a kind of adjusted here. It's because I know for a fact, he's that good of a captain. He's not going to now believe that he shot and did all this. He would have been court-martialed or, for doing something like that. It just was hard for me to kind of think that he wasn't absolute about what happened to the Maxima.
Right. They were making it as if he shot an unarmed vessel or something, or a vessel that wasn't deserving of being fired.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And he was totally I did like that he was cooperative with what the penalties would be, so it was like, well, you have to turn, you know what the procedure is. Number one, you got to go report this, and it'll take a day for it to get there. And so I like that aspect of the story, that kind of where he was cooperating with it as opposed to acting like a madman. He was more cooperative.
Right.
I enjoyed that.
I like little bits like that too, that I wish we had more of, because again, I approached this from having seen the whole series a long time ago, but I know where it goes. And there were these little moments that I wanted to see more of. For example, when Geordi, corrects Data and he's like, we know it's this ship or whatever it was, that's a nice little thing, because Data's just saying, hey, it's one of the two ships. And then Geordi's like, hey, bro, it's this one, and it's nice for him to kind of have Picard's back, but it's also cool for him to kind of keep him in check. But another part that I really liked and would have liked to see more of is, and it was subtle, when they go on the Stargazer as a group, Worf reports to Tasha Yar. He says, the rest of the ship is clear of surprises, Lieutenant Yar.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me think, that's right. Worf is reporting to Yar. She's the chief of security. And I would have loved to see more of that dynamic of chief of security and her like second in command, and how that dynamic works. And, I just would have liked to see more, like a full scene or two or an entire episode devoted to that. Because that's like middle ranks. It's not captain and commander or counselor and doctor, and it's not like ensigns. It's like that stuff in the middle that the fans really want to, sink their teeth into. And, Denise, you said you don't remember filming this episode, but do you remember anything about that dynamic between you and Michael Dorn or Yar and Worf?
It was never, that's a great point you bring up. It was never fully sketched out and addressed. I got the role of chief of security, and Michael Dorn came on a little bit later. We had all kind of been there already, and they added this character. So it was never really. Okay, well, what is the dynamic here? Who are we to each other? You're obviously in security, I believe. I mean, but he's wearing red, right?
Mm-hmm.
His uniform. So I mean that it wasn't really defined, and I don't think they knew it yet.
Red meat is operation, or red is command and helm, which is kind of confusing because you would think that he would be in gold. So he might be in flux, going from one department or division to the next or something. Right? But it's a little
and
vague.
He's a lieutenant as well, right? He's lieutenant
junior grade.
Junior grade lieutenant.
Okay. Because he established that with Geordi in the other episode when he was looking at engineering.
Mm-hmm.
And he was
he's the new guy in Starfleet, just like the new guy. Apparently, I didn't realize that he was added later to the show.
Yeah. Well, not that much. I can't. Let's see. Does he appear in the pilot?
Yeah,
he does. Okay, so
they probably already started filming on the pilot by the time they cast him.
Yes. I remember there was a delay when he joined. Okay.
Do you know if that's because he was just a character that was added later, or was it just late casting?
I couldn't be 100% sure. I'm not 100% sure. I kind of, as I recall, I kind of want to think that it was like a second thought, like an afterthought to have. We need a Klingon. Let's get a Klingon onto the bridge, and then they got that together. Cast him.
Do you recall any of that set from the Stargazer? Because it looked cool that they built a whole nother bridge.
Yeah. No, I can't remember. I can't remember anything about it.
It may have been like a redressed battle bridge from the first season. I think our pal Eve England, our associate producer, messaged us about this morning, saying that she's not going to be at the free for all later because she has a migraine. So while she was watching this episode of Picard, she's like, it was not fun to watch him going through this while she was. So she's not going to be there. But she mentioned something about a redressed Stargazer. I'll have to check on that.
Okay.
Yeah, when Picard gets on the helm of that Stargazer and he wipes down one of the consoles, I was looking like, were they cooking cheeseburgers on that show? Because there's so much stuff caked on there.
Oh, I know.
And he's one of those scraper things.
Yeah.
Well, the thought I had was when he beams onto the Stargazer towards the end and kind of reimagines the battle. When our crew last left the Stargazer, there was all this burnt char on the captain's chair. Yeah, and when he cut beams on, it's gone. There is no char. I thought, oh, he's got to go like that, like who wiped the char off the chair? The char
off the chair.
This is where my mind goes.
Where the heck did that char go?
He's sitting on the crumbs.
Yeah.
Oh, but did you notice? That's the only ship I've ever seen. Well, not ever, but on Next Generation or on Deep Space Nine that had a seatbelt. It was like thigh clamps. When Picard was sitting in the captain's chair of the Stargazer, he had these thigh clamps that went over his bathing suit area, basically, and he unclamped them to get up. So I was like, we finally do have seatbelts.
I thought that was like like control panels.
Probably. There may have been buttons on it, but it went like that. So
that's his old thigh master. He left it there, and it's a futuristic version, guys. You know what? You know what I also did like? Oh, you're about to take a break, so we'll catch it on the other side if we are. But
no. I was just going to say we got a few minutes, but I did say I checked what Eve said, and apparently, they reused some of that stuff from the Battle Bridge and from some of the movies, the previous, it must have been original series movies. What were you going to say?
It looked original series, though. It did look like
an older ship, so it was nice to have that retro feel. Really good detail there.
Yeah, I almost wanted to see it in its lit condition as opposed to all burnt up and kind of not well lit. I wanted to see the brightness of the equipment and kind of the detail. They wanted to hide that, obviously, because we may have recognized something from some other episode. But I think they could have gotten to that earlier. And I wanted to see him get to that ship earlier because they get to the ship and the conflict resolves relatively quickly after he gets on the ship. And it could have been a lot more at stake. The crew of the safety can be at stake. And I think that's one of the things that makes for good drama is when you actually feel like something is at stake, right? It's a possible thing that somebody's going to die. The tension is raised. And I just never felt that from the Ferengi in this episode.
Yeah, what if that's the opening sequence is Picard saying he has a headache, something else happens, and then they say, hey, where did Picard go? And they say he's transported onto another ship, and then cut to the theme song. And then it's kind of starts there, and there's like that would have been really interesting. I was just worried when it first started and they mentioned the Ferengi. I'm like, are we gonna have to wait 45 minutes to see the Ferengi again?
I did think that too. I thought the same thing. I was like, is this going to be one of those things where they talk about the Ferengi but don't show them? But they did show them, and actually, that was another one of my comments: is the improvement of the portrayal of the Ferengi, in my opinion, in this episode. It's really a night and day difference from the Ferengi we saw a couple of episodes back, where they were acting like chimpanzees and jumping around, looking all goofy. Yeah. This version of them seems like the one that's more what we expect out of Ferengi, which is, financially motivated, but also intellectual and well-spoken, not acting like cavemen type, people.
Well, and the whole
but they had the caveman garb.
The whole thing.
Well, the caveman garb is all right. Yeah.
Well, and that whole, thought creator, that manipulator, that's a pretty advanced little concept they've got going here. I mean, I wasn't aware of that was a thing do we see?
I don't think we see that ever again. I don't think we see that ever again. Maybe in one future episode, I don't recall, but I don't think so. Certainly not in other series. But the technology is consistent visually with the Ferengi, that ball, like that Tron looking sphere.
Yeah.
Cirroc, if you'll remember when they took the little Ferengi Marauder ship or whatever class it was in Little Green Men, and they're they have like this Tron looking ball, and that's kind of how they steer with things. So that part's recognizable, but the technology, no, I don't think we ever see it again because that's weird.
Yeah.
And I just laughed when I heard that the guy says, "Oh, I had to buy 2 of them. It cost a lifetime worth of salary to buy 2 of them." And I'm thinking he only had to buy 2 for the sake of the story because they needed one on board the ship and one on board the other ship. And it's just not realistic that he would have bought 2 of this very rare thing that you can't, nobody's ever heard of before. That it would even be ridiculous that there are 2 of them. It should be something that there's only one of, that a Ferengi found himself able to procure. But I don't see, the only reason they made it 2 is because they needed to have it in multiple places. And so they had to reverse the story or rewrite that part of the story.
Like for us, when we have to buy these, super rare spheres, we have to buy them by the dozen nowadays.
Yeah, Costco, yes. It felt like a convenient way for them to explain why there was one aboard the ship and one aboard next to Picard. But they could have gotten away with a better way to execute that story without there actually being 2.
Let's hop over to our break very quickly. There's a bunch more stuff there, and I'm going to never stop being obsessed with wishing that we had a Yar and Worf episode. Maybe there's one that I don't remember, but I would have loved to see that, because in other series, we see that little chain of command, that little dynamic between number 4 and number 5 and things like that. But anyway, we'll take a super quick break. We'll be right back on the 7th Rule.